This is a video that I mean to be read by Betty and Dale's grandchildren and any other young people that are interested. An old guy and a bucket of shrimp. It happened every Friday evening, almost without fail, when the sun resembled a giant orange and was starting to dip into the blue ocean. Old Ed came strolling along the beach to his favorite pier. Clutched in his bony hands was a bucket of shrimp. Ed walked out to the end of the pier, where it seemed he was almost had the world to himself. The glow of the sun is golden brown now. Everyone is gone, except for a few joggers on the beach. Standing out on the end of the pier, Ed is alone in his thoughts and his bucket of shrimp. Before long, however, he is no longer alone. Up in the sky, 1,000 white dots come screeching and squawking, winging their ways towards that lanky frame standing there on the end of the pier. Before long, dozens of seagulls have surrounded him, their wings fluttering and flapping wildly. Ed stands there tossing shrimp to the hungry birds. As he does so, if you listen closely, you can hear him say with a smile, "Thank you, thank you." In a few minutes, the bucket is empty, but Ed does not leave. He stands there, lost in thought, as though transported to another time and place. When he finally turns around and begins to walk back towards the beach, a few of the birds hop along the pier with him until he gets to the stairs, and then they too fly away. And old Ed quietly makes his way down to the end of the beach and on to his home. If you were sitting there on the pier with your fishing line in the water, Ed might seem like a funny old duck, as my dad used to say, or a guy who's a sandwich shy of a picnic, as my kids might say. To onlookers, he's just another old codger, lost in his own weird world, feeding seagulls with a bucket of shrimp. To the onlooker, rituals can look either very strange or very empty. They can seem altogether unimportant, maybe even a bunch of nonsense. Old folks often do strange things, at least in the eyes of the boomers and the busters. Most of them would probably write old Ed off down there in Florida. That's too bad. They'd do very well to know him better. His full name is Eddie Rickenbacker. He was a famous hero back in World War II. On one of his flying missions across the Pacific, he and his 7-member crew went down. Miraculously, all the men survived, crawled out of their plane, and climbed into a life raft. Captain Rickenbacker and his crew floated for days on the rough waters of the Pacific. They fought the sun. They fought the sharks. Most of all, they fought hunger. By the 8th day, their rations ran out. No food, no water. They were 100 miles from land, and no one knew where they were. They needed a miracle. That afternoon, they had a simple devotional service and prayed for a miracle. They tried to nap. Ed leaned back, pulled his military cap over his nose. Time dragged. All he could hear was the slap of the waves against the raft. Suddenly, Ed felt something land on the top of his cap. It was a seagull. Old Ed later would describe how he sat perfectly still, planning his next move. With a flash of his hand and a squawk from the gull, he managed to grab and wring his neck. He tore the feathers off, and he and his starving crew made a meal, a very slight meal, for 8 men. Then they used the intestines for bait. With it, they caught fish, which gave them food and more bait, and the cycle continued. With that simple survival technique, they were able to endure the rigors of the sea until they were found and rescued after 24 days at sea. Eddie Rickenbacker lived many years beyond that ordeal. But he never forgot the sacrifice of that first life-saving gull. And he never stopped saying, "Thank you, thank you." That's why almost every Friday night, he would walk down to the end of the pier with a bucket full of shrimp and a heart full of gratitude. I'd like to tell you a little more about Eddie Rickenbacker. Eddie was born in New York. When he was just 12 years old, his father passed away. And to help support his mother, Eddie quit school and found a job with many of the young automobile companies that were starting up at this time. This led to a job as a race car driver. And Eddie was very successful at this. Some years his winnings were as much as $40,000, which in those days was a nice, tidy sum. When the United States of America entered World War I, excuse me, Eddie suggested to the Army that their Air Force form a squadron of race car drivers. Well, the Army didn't accept Eddie's suggestion about the race car drivers, but they did accept Eddie's services. And because of his great mechanical ability, he soon found himself over in France on the combat line, serving the fighter planes that other pilots were flying. One day, Eddie repaired the car of Colonel Billy Mitchell. Billy was quite impressed with this young man. He said, "Private, what can I do for you?" And he said, "I'd like to take flight training. I'd like to become a fighter pilot." Billy Mitchell said, "I like your spunk," and he arranged for him to have fighter pilot training. Eddie was very adept at this, and he soon found himself back in France as a fighter pilot. Now Eddie could see the big picture. When the Germans would probably set up a decoy, instead of him falling for the decoy, he'd say, "Well, there's got to be combat planes, other fighter planes ready to try to shoot me down if I go after that decoy." So Eddie went and found the other fighter planes, shot them down. And if those decoy planes were still there, foolish enough to be still there, he shot them down too. Eddie soon became an ace and a squadron leader. While he was a squadron leader, that's when his squadron accepted that famous logo of the hat and the ring. One of the things that squadron leader that Eddie insisted on was when they came back from a combat mission, no matter what the situation, the first thing they did was rearm their planes, refuel them, and have the mechanics check them out to make sure that they were airworthy again. This paid off many times for Eddie's squadron, that they didn't get caught flat-footed, not prepared. After the war, the same discipline that Eddie had learned seemed to serve him well too in civilian life. He formed some companies, was a investor and leader. When World War II came along, Eddie again offered his services to the Air Force, and the Air Force accepted it, but of course, at his age now, he was used as an advisor rather than a combat pilot. Well, it was on such a mission as on a fact-finding trip for the Secretary of War and General MacArthur when Eddie and his crew were shot down in the South Pacific. I am very pleased and proud to share this veteran hero story with you, and I ask all of you here to help me tell my grandchildren about it and your grandchildren about it and any other young people that will listen. Thank you. I'd like to continue this by reading something that Paul Harvey has written. This apparently was written by Paul Harvey to his grandchildren. Paul Harvey writes, "We tried so hard to make things better for our kids that we made them worse. For my grandchildren, I'd like better. I'd really like for them to know about hand-me-down clothes and handmade ice cream and leftover meatloaf sandwiches. I really would. I hope you learn humility by being humiliated, and that you learn honesty by being cheated. I hope you learn to make your own bed and mow the lawn and wash the car. And I really hope that nobody gives you a brand new car when you are 16. It'll be good if at least one time you can see puppies born and your old dog put to sleep. I hope you get a black eye for fighting for something that you believe in. I hope you have to share a bedroom with your younger brother or sister, and it's all right if you have to draw a line down the middle of the room, but when he or she wants to crawl under the covers with you because he or she are scared, I hope you let them. When you want to go to a movie and your little brother and sister want to tag along, I hope you let them. I hope you have to walk uphill to school with your friends, and that you live in a town where you can do so safely. On rainy days when you have to catch a ride, I hope you don't ask your driver to drop you 2 blocks away, so you won't be seen riding with someone as uncool as your mom. If you want a slingshot, I hope your dad teaches you how to make one instead of buying one. I hope you learn to dig in the dirt and to read books. When you learn to use